This is Scheme Design Part 3. So, let's think about the core conditions, the things that are necessary to have in place to help ensure that you have a successful coaching or mentoring scheme. It's also important to remember that it doesn't necessarily ensure it. It's that people don't always behave in predictable ways. So it's quite possible that your coaching and mentoring program would absolutely take off. On the other hand, it might need more support, more help, and more encouragement. And if you have the job of being the coaching or the mentoring manager, then you have to be, if you like, a dog with a bone. You keep chewing away at it. You keep trying to drive it forward. And that's one of the core conditions. The first important condition is senior leadership participation. Now, this doesn't mean that the senior leaders say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, get on with it. What it actually means is that senior leaders join in. And some of them will say, oh yes, I'll become a mentor or I'll become a coach. However, it sends a far more powerful signal to the rest of the organization if in fact the senior leaders say, I have taken a coach for myself or I have taken a mentor for myself. This makes a statement. If it's all right for the senior leaders to be coached, to be mentored, then it's okay for everybody else. So linked to that, it's important that there is a senior member of the organization who is the champion or the sponsor of coaching or mentoring. This is also an important consideration. They need to be somebody who has the respect of people in the business. Start where there is interest. So being aware of the barriers is certainly important. It lets you know where you are and what you might need to do. But it's also important to find a group of enthusiastic people who think that coaching and or mentoring is a good idea and that they want to participate and they want to learn. In this way, you start off on a positive foot. Consider the question of voluntarism. You want people to volunteer to participate. You don't want people to be press-ganged into it. And so thinking about what voluntarism means is also an important thing that you may need to discuss with some of your colleagues. So, for example, could a coachee or a mentee volunteer to be mentored or coached? Do coaches or mentors volunteer to participate in the program? And what might that look like? There is also a need for people to be able to get out of the relationship if they need to. Review every third meeting and ask whether or not people want to continue or whether they want to stop. Training for both parties. Both coaches and mentors need to be trained, and so do mentees and coachees. And in the next session, we'll look at some of the details of what that training might involve and what it might consist of. I mentioned previously in the last session about ongoing support for participants. Now, this can take many different forms. It could be in the form of what some people refer to as learning sets, where groups of coaches and mentors get together to discuss some of the issues and challenges that they're having whilst coaching or mentoring people within their organization. I have seen this work very, very well. It probably needs an expert external facilitator to help you do that, somebody who knows about coaching and mentoring, but it does seem to be quite an effective process. Other forms of ongoing support have included things like making sure that there is an appropriate library in the business, a collection of video materials of things for people to read and look at. It's also important that the mentoring or coaching manager or the learning and development manager, whoever it is, knows enough about coaching and mentoring to be able to provide ongoing support on an as and when basis, on a drawdown basis. So think creatively about ways in which you can support people in their coaching and mentoring practice. This is a key to it being successful, because if you just leave them to get on with it by themselves, it may just flounder. Matching criteria. How are you putting people together and on what basis? And this needs to relate to the question of what is the purpose of the coaching or mentoring, and it also needs to relate to who is it for. And there'll be a more detailed session on matching later. Reviewable ground rule. That is another core condition. Ongoing review is also important, and feeding back into the system. And if you do get together learning sets with people, then ongoing review can be a very useful process which happens within the action learning sets. Asking the question of whose agenda is it is another important thing to keep in mind, and it really needs to be the coachees or the mentees. And this is where you might have a battle with other managers. So be clear that if it is anybody else's agenda other than the coachees or the mentees, then the process, the system will have problems. And it's quite possible that the coachees and the mentees' agendas do indeed align with the organisations, if only they are given chance, and they may interpret these in different ways. And again, coaching and mentoring is respecting individuals. Evaluation and monitoring is another important element, and we will look at that in another session. And also thinking about coaching and mentoring as actually legitimate work. This is a cultural thing. If you are managing people, you will have meetings with them. Coaching and mentoring is a meeting with an individual to discuss their work. This is legitimate. And are your people within the organisation ready for coaching and mentoring? And when you're thinking about starting your scheme, once you've done all this preliminary work, it is much better to have what I call a soft launch and a low-key marketing process rather than to have a big bang, to have a big event. Because what this does is raises expectations of people, and sometimes these expectations can't be delivered on immediately. So think about having lunchtime sessions, newsletters, blogs, mentor or coach testimony, mentee or coachee testimony, publish coaching and mentoring list, get people talking about it, because that is how it will spread and develop.